Yeah, I was at SRI. I got there in April of '73, and to run their computer lab for their artificial intelligence center, hence the Lisp, idea. But and so I was the boiler room operator for boiler room designers, and so I'm doing this and having a blast doing it, and running on this 10x system that we got from BBN in Boston, and and things are going along fine. And then this buddy of mine named Bill Plummer, who was back at BBN then, he was doing something. He'd written the FTP, the Fault Transfer Protocol specification earlier, and so that's how I got to know him. And then he said he was debugging this thing called TCP, and they were doing it inside the BBN amongst two computers inside BBN, but they'd like to throw it across the country and see how it broke, and would I, participate? And I said, sure, why not? I wasn't paid to do that. I mean, actually, most of us weren't paid to do whatever we really did. We were paid to do something else, and then we found something fun to do, and that's what I found. And so I started debugging this stuff in this BCPL, like what the heck is that, and because it was funny, you wrote it in that language, but when you debugged, it was assembler, and you're dealing with a bare machine and no real-time editors or debuggers or anything like that. Our debugger was a core dump, and then pawing through that to figure out what the heck went wrong. And my memory in the early days was, we had no idea how many buffers to have inside the computer or anything like that. We heard about this retransmission. You're going to have to hold on to stuff until you get an acknowledgement that, all that jazz. And we thought, well, how many buffers do you have? We had no idea, I mean, you only have as much as you have real physical memory in those days. And so anyway, this is the early days of internet networking, and it was really a mystery to all of us. I mean, I'll be blunt. I mean, the ARPANET was running, and we got some knowledge from that. But when you got networks coming that are vastly different speeds and characteristics, it stretches the architecture to its limits and beyond. It was just a lot of fun. Like I said, I didn't get paid to do that, but I did it. I did it probably more than I did anything else. I think that president of SRI is no longer with us. Oh, no, Don Nielsen's here. He could tell on me. And and then I went to work a couple years later to this place called ISI down in Los Angeles, and which was the largest node on the internet, and at the time, and it served about 3,000 people simultaneously. I had a room full of PDP-10s and some PDP-11s, and then eventually VAXs and things like that, and I was working for Vint at the time. By that time, he was in Washington at ARPA, and he was really my boss. I mean, I had some putative boss. Danny and I had the same boss, right? Keith, who was the bag man. He got us the money, okay? And then we did the work. And Keith had no idea what we did, but he could talk. Oh, he was good. Anyway, and so. Bob Kahn and Vint told me that my job was to, with no budget, standard ARPA, project, to coordinate the entire ARPANET to move it over to TCP/IP. And you got 100 different computers and labs around the country and the world, all running whatever they're running, and they various different operating systems. And we had to coordinate all this to get this all to move over. And then some idiot in Washington decided on January 1st, 1983 was the cutover date. And, now, New Year's Eve is not a great time to be up and switching everything over. But, bean counters, they like to do what they like to do. So I can remember that night, being there and turning off all the machines. We had to reboot all the machines and then bring them up and pray, and it was, and try to be sober. And I mean it passed fine. I mean I don't recall getting a phone call from you, do I? No. And I do. I shouldn't say this, but I will, because I'm Dan Lynch. So somewhere along the way when I was at ISI, I got this visit from some spooky guy, and he wanted me to turn over all the emails of one of my customers. And because he was a government employee and they thought he was stealing government property and all that jazz, and they thought they could, get his email records. This is the early 80s, right? And so I called Bob Kahn. I just got, whoops, better go to the top on this one real fast. Told him what was going on. He said, don't break the law, Dan. That was his advice, And so I talked to the guy, and I told the guy, I says, okay, I can do that. They're on backup tapes and all that jazz. It'll take a few days to get all this stuff for you. But I can tell you, if this guy has a good lawyer, he can deny that he ever wrote any of that. That everything in email is absolutely forgeable. And they went, what? They had no idea. They thought email was like regular mail, and all that jazz. Anyway, it wasn't. It isn't. It still isn't. But the court systems are starting to, anyway, the world evolves. I mean, we've created a mess,
Well, speak for yourself.
It's a great mess, though, isn't it? And then a few years later, when I was going to do this list machine thing, I looked around, and that wasn't going well. And so I looked around at these vendors who were trying to figure out this TCP stuff, because, and they were doing an okay job of implementing it, but they were really pretty clueless about what it could do and what it couldn't do. And so I got ARPA to issue a statement that said, Dan Lynch and ARPA invite you to a TCP IP implementers workshop in Monterey, California in August of '86. And anyway, that was the beginning of the big ride for me. And 300 people came, and I got the John Postels and Danny Cohen and all these guys to come up and explain how this stuff worked and what didn't work and all that jazz. And it took off, and it became its giant, commercial thing that about 50,000 people a year go to it right now. It's amazing. I mean, I'm no longer associated with it at all, Interop, but it's in 10 different countries. So the internet, is an unstoppable thing. Congratulations and thank you. Okay.